A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus spoke the following parable to some people who prided themselves on being virtuous and despised everyone else. Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee, the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood there and said this prayer to himself: I thank you, God, that I am not grasping, unjust, adulterous like the rest of humanity, and particularly I am not like this tax collector here. I fast twice a week. I pay tithes on all I get. The tax collector stood some distance away, not daring even to raise his eyes to heaven. But he beat his breast and said, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. This one, I tell you, went home again at rights with God. The other did not. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. The Gospel of the Lord. Well, at whatever hour of the day you're viewing this, greetings. This year, we have been experiencing the Gospel of Luke. And what I really appreciate about this Gospel is those parables or those passages or teachings of Jesus that are unique to this Gospel. And we have one such example today. And it shows St. Luke's capacity to enter into the depths of human experience beyond narrow categories of good and bad, of holiness and sinfulness, to reach to the complexity that is in each one of us. And like every parable, this one is a mirror, that we see parts of ourselves in the characters presented to us. So there are these two people in the temple to pray. The first one, even though he addresses God, I thank you, God, the content of the prayer very quickly turns to himself, and particularly his very positive esteem towards his own goodness. I am not grasping, unjust, adulterous, etc. And he even goes further, because he's able in his own mind to distinguish himself from the other person who's praying in the chapel, the tax collector. So this first person is praying with great confidence. And I would imagine that in terms of his external behaviour, it would be faithful and good. He would be doing the things that he was taught from his earliest years in terms of right behaviour. Very admirable. The second person cannot even dare in his own heart to pray more than a few words. He's at some distance away, so probably not at the centre of the temple where the first man is. He's full of shame and doesn't dare even to raise his eyes to heaven. He beats his breast. Each of those is important. And all he can do is pray a very short prayer. God, be merciful to me, a sinner. This is profound because it speaks to us of our need to be deeply aware of who we are. Yes, in our goodness, for which we give thanks, but also in our absolute need of God's grace. And that's true wherever we are of life's journey, that we are in the position of that second person. God, be merciful to me. I said this is a profound gospel because it speaks and challenges us on ways we can ever easily separate what we regard as dark from us. We see this in civil society. In a courtroom, when people clap, when somebody receives a severe sentence for what they did. I am not like that other person. I don't have the darkness that that other person has. And yet that is simplistic, blind to who we are, and lacks compassion for our common humanity. And we can think of many other examples in our personal and civic lives. Timothy Ratcliffe, wonderful Dominican priest, who, a bit like Luke, goes to the depth of what he observes around him, made the observation recently. He says, "Our society has become very good at seeking justice and asserting rights, and that is so important, and we know that. What we have lost, or what we're less keen about, or less enthusiastic about, is the capacity for mercy and a sense of redemption." And he was challenging those who was reading his thoughts to say, can we not change the question to not what can I do to remind the other person of the wrong they have done, but what can I do that we can help one another to move forward as a human community. The other aspect of that is the capacity for all of us to embrace our goodness and also our vulnerabilities, and each of us have them. We are called to goodness. We are called to holiness. And the compassionate way we deal with that is not to pretend that we don't have within us the capacity to do anger, the capacity to do violence, the capacity to harm, but rather knowing these things are also part of our humanity. That awareness means we're able to open ourselves to God's grace and the support of one another. In other words, to use Luke's image, to embrace the goodness in us, but also the second person, the one who said, "God, be merciful to me, a sinner." And we need to say that prayer every moment of our lives till the very end. And it's in that awareness, our capacity for compassion. Many of us grew up with that wonderful movie To Kill a Mockingbird that was produced in the early 1960s. And many of us would also remember from either seeing the movie or studying the book at school, the wonderful lesson that the father, Atticus, gives his daughter Scout in that film. She had been judging a fellow child in her class badly because of his manners. And Atticus makes the point, we really don't understand another person until we walk in their shoes. Now, we can never pretend to be completely inside another person in terms of understanding their experience. But we can, with God's help and the support of one another, reach a deeper understanding of what another person may be going through, who we may easily tend to judge badly. What is it to learn to walk in the shoes of another person? I'd just like to conclude, and this is related to talking about the wisdom of the elderly. And we all know this is not a guaranteed thing. Somebody can be a very mature person at 20 and immature at 80. But the general trajectory for all of us is, hopefully, that direction of a greater understanding of life as the years progress. And that's understandable because of the accumulation of human experience, both in its goodness and its weakness. I think it's a wonderful reason why grandchildren and grandparents are so close, because the children detect in the grandparent that acquired wisdom which sees life at a deeper level simply because of that passage of time and experience. And in the second reading today from Paul's letter to Timothy, it talks, "My life is already being poured away as a libation, and the time has come for me to be gone." That sense of we're moving towards that for which we have been created, life with God and one another with God, and a sense of being able to view life in a greater wholeness than we can when we're younger. And that relates to this gospel, because I think as we journey through life, we move from categories, black and white, goodness and wrongness, to a deeper understanding of what it is to be human. And that comes often with great difficulty through the challenges of life. And so just all of us to draw on the experience of our elder people with their wisdom, whether it's in our families or in this parish, because that wisdom probably brings a greater sense of what it meant when this second person said, "God be merciful to me, a sinner." Prayed not in fear, but prayed with a great sense of love and trust in God's absolute love for us. Have a great Sunday. God bless you all.